The first figure, opening. Everything starts in our childhood. All of our behaviors, our passions, even our worldviews will be shaped by what we experience and observe through the senses in our early life. The thing is, in adult life, we tend to forget about how we truly felt as children, and hence we forget who we once were. Thus, we lose a part of ourselves. An adult must take monthly, if not weekly, to daily inventory of their own emotions, ideas, growth, even imperfections and struggles. What else would hold an adult back from growth, other than not acknowledging something from their childhood that they never healed from? Once we can heal, we can find our purpose. Once we know how to heal, we can begin growth in nutritious soil. Chapter 1, My Innocence. From ages 0 to 2.5, we will call these seedling years. From age 3 to 9, we will call these germination years. When we were kids, we had not a care in the world. Things were much simpler. Colors were more vibrant. Cherished moments were more memorable, even if we experienced childhood trauma and regret. Even in our mother's womb, we were learning, hearing the vibrations, tones, voices, music, taking in the nutrition, chemicals, and stress from the bodies of our mothers. Our genetic programming had begun from our father and mother. We've inherited traits without choice, without a say in the matter. Then they say, "Oh, you're just like your father," or "You act just like your mom." Whether in a good or bad connotation, that subconsciously will play a role in our development. A wise man once said, "You're not an adult until you're 60, 70 years old." Which is a hard pill to swallow because one would ask, "Don't I pay bills?" They would say, "I have 3 kids. I sacrifice my life every day. How am I not an adult?" Well, if you think about it, human life is bustling and busy with school from an early age. And much time is spent in play and not observing people, the environment, or much else. We essentially live in a place of la-la land and imagination. Then children's attention is consumed with technology, television, etc. The older generations were more advanced because they had fewer distractions as children and were forced to live in reality and still be a child. That's not to say that today's generation doesn't have its share of emerging childhood geniuses and indigo children, gifted toddlers and little ones. But we can also concur that their parents have instilled in them the necessary functions and environment to develop in such a way. What we can get from this analysis is that true growth will have to be purposely done in later life if it is not instilled in us in early life. The adult will most likely have to find a sense of identity in their 20s because none of the time allotted to us was spent focusing inward on ourselves during early development. So this hits hard around 13 to 16 years old and comes off as a rebellious stage. Chapter 2, Confidence. Mike Tyson said that confidence supersedes genius. When we look around today, who is running our world? not the antisocial, not the super smart, not even the hardest worker. It is the outspoken, the ambitious, and often the arrogant. Confidence is key. Even in the early days of a child's social development, we can see that the child who is more social often thrives more, has more friends, and is more inclined to take initiative in classroom activities. The shy kid needs a little push and encouragement. This adds more mental effort on the teacher, who has to tend to the child's emotional development, as well as focus and center energy on the child more often. When we reach a certain age, all that goes out the window. Yes, our children are still developing and should be. They just started living. But could we be stunning their growth by not expecting them to excel further than just the minimum? It gets to a point. We can instill in them all the tools that we as adults may not even fully possess, like integrity, fearlessness, and teamwork. Each generation should improve more than the latter. Isn't that the meaning of progression? Chapter 3, The Child Star. There are plenty of child stars who excel beyond the norm and showed a more developed personality, intellect, and awareness. Though these beautiful babies weren't placed in the right environment to thrive further, and thus stunted their adult development. Some even developed trauma and mental disorders. For example, Michael Jackson, one of the greatest performers, artists, and souls we've ever been blessed with in the music and memory, mentioned many times how he grew up in an abusive environment. He mentioned how he was forced to perform instead of being able to be a child, and thus found himself being misunderstood by the masses. Just think, if he was given the proper love and balance with the gifts, what a healthy voice and inspiration he could have been, thus further respected as. Jackson's daughter stated that her father had depression and was taking antidepressants. He also suffered from sleep deprivation, chronic insomnia, and sadly overdosed on propofol. He was also taking lorazepam. These drugs were normally used to prevent anxiety before surgery and death. It's not far-fetched to think that his inability to sleep and depression spanned from something deeper and earlier in his life. That this was rooted deep in his subconscious mind from childhood, and he had not found the proper balance of performing to perfection and rest. He developed depression, never being able to speak on how he felt, heal from his childhood trauma, or even reflect on his emotions until his 20s. All he knew was work, work, work. Then he would create some of the greatest compositions our ears have ever had the honor of hearing. And as a lifelong fan of Michael Jackson, that is sad. He will always be respected and missed in my eyes. Michael will live on as an inspiration and enigma we only see once in a lifetime. Truly, the child star. Chapter 4, The First Dream. When your dream first called you, you didn't fully understand how. The first moment you were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? There was a blank space in your mind. Then the first idea that shot through the universe, subconsciously, made its place to your voice, and you said, I want to be a ... You received praise, and a flood of happiness came upon you, as if you had just discovered something groundbreaking. Even before you firmly planted your identity in that dream, The joy that it gave you was enough. You received toys, costumes, and watched TV shows relating to it. This may have even been an extracurricular activity, baseball, basketball, or music. Nobody had yet told you that you needed something to fall back on. Most parents think about what is best for you and use the same sentence in utter disregard to the fact that many of the world's geniuses were loyal to one craft. Even though having hands in other areas, any ambition is possible with dedication, strategic planning, and confidence. Don't forget prayer. Not to mention, there is a rising rate of successful youth in content creation with YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. There are more young millionaires than ever before. A lot of them are amassing fortunes by the time they are 18 years of age. Based on streaming and views, in assumption, most of these young people are just living their lives and building a future for themselves and their families. Chapter 5, Early Development. I found myself with the opportunity to attend a youth symposium, a community of students, youth leaders, and adult mentors hosted by the mayor of my city. We broke out into discussion groups in different rooms of a community college. The young man leading the group was no older than 24, a little younger than me. He asked the children present a question that just gave me an understanding of his lack of childhood awareness. He asked, "Do teachers make you feel heard? And how does that make you feel?" Two different questions for a human being who hasn't even developed the ability to communicate emotionally. These children were from ages 5 to 13 years old, and the room stood quiet for some time. So I held my peace until the appropriate time came, and I stated, "I remember how it was as a kid, yet I didn't develop the words to define how I felt until I grew up. Though I was very aware of my youth and contemplated life quite often, my prefrontal cortex hadn't even fully grown in my brain. I did things for reasons I did not know, and when I was asked why I did them, I stood silent. Yes, this man tried creating a safe space for these kids to speak up, and he got few replies and some engagement. But what it lacked was natural flow. Kids get comfortable with confidence, authenticity, and strength. If these traits are demonstrated by an adult, it is easier for a child to release tension in the brain for maintaining a state of self-analysis and open them to a state of self-expression. Chapter 6, The Healing Process. No matter what age you are, the process of healing should start now. You deserve to be the best version of yourself. You deserve to be that wholesome and living light to the world. Every adult is essentially still living as the 10-year-old version of themselves, standing in their grown-up body. Every child is the reflection of their adult self in its fullest potential. The richest man in Africa, Aliko Dangote, was young when he received a $3,000 loan from his uncle to start his business. He has now amassed a net worth of $23.9 billion. This all transpired after Dangote's father passed away. He was only 8 years old. When do you think he began his healing process? Immediately. In fact, we can presume the hardship of the loss of his father may have motivated him to achieve his dreams further. We can take it that his father instilled in him all that he needed as a young boy to achieve beyond what was handed to him. I dealt with childhood trauma for a large portion of my life. And the reason this book is not riddled with back-to-back statistics is because I believe life experience is the best teacher. To reflect on oneself, to know thyself, is the best education.